You're listening to HBCU in Entertainment, where diversity, equity, and inclusion refine the future of entertainment. I'm your host, Stacey Milner, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I want to introduce you to a talented trailblazer and one of my dear friends and business partners, speaker, author, social entrepreneur, Halleemah Nash. Halleemah Nash is the brilliant mind behind the underrepresented talent solutions firm Rosecrans Ventures, where she provides coaching and career courses for marginalized talent populations in the workforce. Backed by 12 plus years driving business initiatives that attract, retain, and develop diverse talent. Halleemah's executive career includes social impact and education-based projects at iMentor, Charities, and the Chicago Bulls. Hailing from Compton, California, and graduate of Howard University, help me welcome Halleemah Nash. Welcome to today's HBCU in Entertainment.
What an intro. I have to keep you around, Stacey. Thank you.
Honored to have you. So we're going to jump into some questions here. There's so many places that we could jump off. But first and foremost, thank you again for just being who you are, for what you give to the community. And most importantly, thank you for being my friend and being a business associate. So really appreciate you. But Halleemah, your journey is spectacular and you've worn many hats like executive director, vice president, community relations manager, and even a youth pastor. I didn't know that. So can you walk us through your journey and how you came to be founder of Rosecrans Ventures?
So, and thank you for the introduction. I truly believe that like our bios speak our dopeness back to us, which combats things like imposter syndrome and all of the questions that we have about our career journey. So I appreciate that. And also a special thank you to you being able to be here on this podcast and be a guest of someone who I respect so greatly for your work in community and with HBCUs and in industry is also an honor for me. So thank you very much, Stacey. My journey, I always like to say it started in Compton, California. I'm a Compton kid. I grew up in the beautiful city of Compton, where I learned a lot from a community perspective and gained a lot of transferable skills that stuck with me throughout all of the transitions of my career. I went to Howard University as a first generation college student. Shout out to HU. And then while I was on campus, I was really discovering, like so many of our college students are, what my path was going to be based on what I liked to do and what I felt talented to do and what was going to make me money. And at that point in time, I thought it was business. I majored in business management. It was all about, get out the hood, make enough money to come buy your mama a house or do whatever it is that you needed to do. But when I got on campus at Howard University, I was so energized by social impact, this idea of reaching back as you climb. And I tried to discover what it might look like for me to still have a career where I could secure the bag, I could secure my own, sort of wealth. I could also make a difference in my community and I could bridge those two. So I left Howard after graduation and went to Duke University and I studied nonprofit management and theology. I actually thought about doing faith-based community development, but I was working for the basketball team. And I like telling this story because when you listen to it, it might sound like you were all over the place. You were majoring in business, but interested in community. And then you were, interested in theology. I was attaching myself to all of the things that I was interested in.
But can I put a pin right there?
Yeah.
That is what this generation does today. And what I find is happening is like they have interest in so many different places. So I think this is so relatable that it may sound like you were all over the place, but I just think that it's going to speak to the community. So continue your story.
Yes, that you don't have to have a linear path. And from a generational perspective, I know my parents' generation, you graduate high school, you major in a thing in college, you get a job in that major, you remain in that career until you retire, right? That was, what so many people in that generation did. And for me, I wanted to have a career that felt life-giving to me. where I felt like I was doing something that I loved, something that I was interested in, and something that connected me to my younger self as a first gen student that came from a marginalized community. And so while I was on campus, I had a graduate assistantship with the basketball team. And I love professional sports. And that was my hustle because I didn't have enough money to just be in grad school. I got a scholarship, but I needed to figure out, can I be an RA? Can I do a part-time job to, cover my expenses? And while I was working for the basketball team, that was the beginning of me sort of carving and creating a career path. I was working at a homeless shelter at the time as a part of my internship for theology. I was working with the basketball team as a part of my resident assistantship. And I created a community program that got the basketball team engaged in that community that was a stone's throw away from the campus. And that started my career in attaching this idea of entertainment to impact, and then using my skills in business to sort of build what that might look like from a success standpoint. So I went to Chicago and worked for the Chicago Bulls, and I did all of their nonprofit off the court things. And so my career started in professional sports as a woman, and there weren't many of us, as a Black woman.
And still not.
And there still aren't many of us, right? And from there, I continued to do community impact. I worked for Chicago Housing Authority. That meant something to me as someone that grew up in public housing during a period of time. I became an executive director for a professional athlete who played for the NFL, Mr. Israel Adonijay. He asked me to head up his foundation. I was tapped from the city to do city agency work with public housing youth and those who were marginalized. And so I sort of branched out this idea of sports and entertainment and social impact. Fast forward to now, in the pandemic, my role was eliminated, helping students in the workforce, power their careers. And I had a decision to make, Stacey. I said, either I'm going to go back in the job market and continue to build these initiatives from the ground up, continue to build partnerships between faith-based institutions and private and public sector, and bringing people together to make strong community impact, or I am going to do what I'm asking companies to do, which is bet on Black and brown talent. And I'm going to bet on myself. So I created Rosecrans Ventures. Rosecrans is the avenue that I grew up off in Compton, California. And it's this idea of helping people to navigate their local intersections. Rosecrans is a street that goes through Compton. And, my first job was off Rosecrans. My middle school was off Rosecrans. That was the street that you can take the bus to. And if you get to the freeway, it takes you to the beach. It takes you to downtown. It takes you to all of these different spaces. So if I can help marginalized talent, people with queer identities, women and girls, Black and brown people, people that are formerly incarcerated coming into the job market, if I can help them to navigate the first job, the first interview, developing their career plan, their relationship with their manager, I do believe that those pathways will take them to the career and the big, bold future that they are hoping to create.
Wow. That's powerful. I just want to go back to one thing. You said navigate your local intersections, right?
Yeah.
That's powerful, because even when I think about myself, right? I grew up raised by a single mom, government welfare system, in the projects. But what I saw was something beyond that, right? I saw my community, and I had a real understanding of what my community needed, which is what drives my passion for why I want to give back, And I just think that people need to look at where they are and see the possibilities there, and maybe what that is feeding them, because it sounds like to me that's what happened with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it is, and I know you're interviewing me, but it's also a part of what's so inspirational about your career path. Navigating the entertainment industry as a woman of color and being able to see a larger future, a greater future for people that look like you, that are in the beginning of creating that. And you could see when you created this vision and you were in your office and scribbling things on notebooks, that this could be something that helped people to hone in on their local intersections. You know,
Right.
people that are from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, going to Southern University, having an opportunity to work in production in Hollywood. People that are, you know, in East Texas and going to Prairie View A&M, creating a pathway for them to go to New York City and work at an entertainment firm. I think that foresight becomes so important in terms of how we create a better future of work.
That's why I love working with you. This is good. I love it. So now when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, what were some of the challenges you faced when breaking into the industry?
You know, I had to, you know, in order to access an opportunity in professional sports, you know, I had to do the most. You know, we tell our students now it's not about doing the most. Show up as your authentic self. And that's not what the game was at that period in time. It was, this is how you had to dress. This is how you had to present yourself. You know, I FedExed my resume to every single person whose name I could find in the media guide at the Chicago Bulls, so that they could see who I was. There was no recruiting team at HBCUs for professional sports teams at that point in time. You know, we were really trying to break into the door. So when I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion and the evolution of what that industry has looked like, there have been people on the front lines of recruiting teams and human resource teams that are really thinking about delivering on their diversity promises for their organizations that wasn't at the forefront, particularly in professional sports at that period of time. So DEI for me was, how do I show up in this homogenous space where there aren't a lot of people that look like me, show up excellently, do a wonderful job at my job so that I could secure long-term opportunities in sports. Like, that was the DEI path. I am a Black woman in this space. When I leave here, I want how they think about Howard University students interested in sports to be that we are hardworking, that we show up well, that we are brilliant, we are talented, and we can lead. I wanted that to be the legacy that existed when folks think about diversity as an asset in their organization from a professional sports standpoint, for sure.
Wow. I love it. And, you know, we're going to mirror each other so much in this because that was my whole thing, right? Same thing. I knew that there was talent from our nation's HBCUs. And I knew just in general, people of color, you know, did not have the access when it came to these coveted inner circle spaces. And so I was like, okay, I'm here. But let me tell you, there's a lot more of me out there. We're just not letting you in. And so with the work of what we do and that we end up doing together, you and I, this is what we're doing. We're preparing and equipping, you know, that next generation talent to step into these spaces, to show up, to know how to show up. They already have a sense of it, but that the whole imposter syndrome thing is really real. And I think sometimes that's what hinders, you know, folks from going all the way. They're like, I don't have all the buckets or all the skills. So then they feel like they're not qualified, or I really shouldn't be here when you should be there. But again, I just, you know, this whole DE&I thing, we have to continue to keep the pedal to the metal because the obstacles are still there, but it takes programs and people who are forward thinking like yourself that we want to keep making this space available. And I think the industry appreciates the value of what we have done in terms of shining a spotlight on HBCUs, and then the talent that's coming out that's actually now working in this space, and they're showing up and showing out. But I just...
And what I'll also say, Stacey, is I love that you mentioned that, because to me, that is the picture of allyship and what allyship should look like. You didn't attend an HBCU, but when you got into a specific room, you didn't decide to close the door after you. You know, you tried to figure out how you can create a door stopper so that door stayed open. And on your team, you're recruiting people who went to HBCUs, people that didn't go to HBCUs, people that might have only worked for Black-owned businesses, people that have worked for diverse institutions. And that's allyship. How can we be allies to one another becomes a very important question, because how we were talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion post George Floyd was one thing. How we are talking about it post the affirmative action decision that came down from the Supreme Court has become another thing, because we are learning organizations that talked about prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, that we are seeing what that priority looks like when it is not performative DEI. And so as allies, what we have to do, when you mentioned, you know, people are hitting the ground running, people are hearing about this HBCU in LA effort, people are opening doors, partners are banging on your door saying that I want to be involved. That shines a light on organizations and corporations that are serious about delivering on diversity. It's good for business, it's good for community, and it's good for the future of the creative economy.
Drop the mic. Absolutely. So now, talking about HBCUs, as an HBCU graduate of Howard, which you have mentioned before, shout out to the HU folks out there. As y'all all say, the real HU.
You know.
Okay. How did your HBCU, your HBCU experience prepare you for the workforce? I mean, I think we heard a little bit of that, but I'd love for you to expound a little bit.
It's so hard to really put into words what Howard University gifted me from a network standpoint and just from a resource and learning perspective. Like, you know, those were two kind of big buckets that I would say had the greatest impact. Network and relationships, we all know how huge that is. The Howard University community, we show up for one another. And then you start to see the family, you know, structure widen a little bit. So my cousins who went to Morehouse, you know, our second cousins that went to Spelman and Prairie View and Stillman College and in other spaces, they see that you went to an HBCU and you become a part of this sort of family fabric. And at Howard, it really drove home, the experience itself really drove home that this diploma that you are getting ready to get is about more than you. It has to be connected to more than you. This is a communal experience. This is an ancestral experience. And having an educational experience that was the backdrop was really powerful, because it wasn't just about how I could get a check and become really rich. You know, sure, that's great. But how can I create generational wealth for my family? And how can that be a part of my larger Howard University family, my larger HBCU family, my larger, you know, sort of people of color in this country? And then from a learning perspective, Stacey, I could be on any team. I was blowing other interns out the water. I was interning in classes with UCLA students in California, with Yale students, but the caliber of what I was able to deliver because of my learning experience and the diversity of what you get at Howard, it just exposed me to so much more. So my readiness in the workplace was at a higher level. So as we talk about pedigree, right? You know, because there are recruiters that might be listening to this podcast. When you review resumes, check your bias when it comes to pedigree, because there are folks that think that talent can only come from a Harvard University, that the best talent is only going to come from a Boston College or for a University of Southern California. But when you think about pedigree, you have to connect it to the abilities of the actual talent of students, not just the institution that they went to. And that's what I think HBCU in LA is opening folks up to. They are meeting students in HBCU in LA and saying, these young people are far more advanced than some of our early careerists from a readiness perspective because of what they're getting on their campuses and what they're getting in this program. So that was my testimony at Howard for sure. I was way more prepared. I was ready to roll in any industry, in any space. Like, that's the transferable skills that you get growing up in a place like Compton and then being educated at a place like Howard.
Wow. So I just want to dig a little bit deeper, because if you are talking to, like you said, recruiters and other industry folks will be listening to this podcast, I hear what you're saying, and I've heard it over and over again from other, you know, graduates of HBCUs and the experience that they get. But can you help those outside of the HBCU experience understand the culture and the environment that exists within that community and why it creates such a pedigree and, you know, this mentality of work and experience of giving and being excellent. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
Certainly, you know, and I'll paint the picture for you, Stacey. You know, being able to learn general subjects where the subject matter and the books that you might read might be the same across institutions. But being able to be in those classes with students of color from 17 different countries that speak multiple languages, that are navigating life in all of those different ways, from Trinidad and Tobago to Memphis, Tennessee, to, you know, Brooklyn, New York. And you are able to establish community and relationships across those differences with an anchor that you can show up fully as yourself, and your version of Blackness is welcome and celebrated here. That level of belonging being the backdrop of your learning powers your learning experience. Because if I feel like I belong, if I feel like my Blackness, my version of Blackness, where I come from, is celebrated and welcomed and embraced, if I'm struggling in a class, I'm going to be a little more prone to have a conversation with my professor, to reach out to the person that's next to me for assistance. And then when it's time for me to compete for an internship opportunity, the team culture and environment really pushes to make sure that you are prepared and that you are ready. I didn't have teachers that let me show up raggedy. I had teachers that were willing to stay after class to sit with me to ensure that I was successful. I came into Howard taking 2 remedial classes because I did not test into college math and I did not test into college English. I had professors for both of those classes that spent intentional time with me to ensure that I was passing my courses, that didn't have to. And that is the HBCU experience. We are going to make sure, we are going to hug you, nurture you, make sure you have the resources that you need. And as a person that thrived in that environment, I ended up leaving there and making that a life principle. Any opportunity that I have is bigger than myself. And I was gifted that with the Howard University and HBCU experience.
Wow, that's powerful. And lady, that is exactly what you do. You give that same thing to the next generation. And I have seen it poured into, I just watch you, and the students walk away feeling so empowered, because breaking into this industry, and for them coming into this industry, they're not getting that same love and that same warmth, and they're not immersed into this fabric of diversity and complexity of people and experiences when they step into these predominantly white situations. Mm-hmm. They're the only one, and they don't know quite, this is a lot for me to navigate as a new person. But what you bring to them through your experience and your passion for being able to give them the tools that they need, they're flourishing and they're able to make that adjustment. So anyway, so we're going to move now to a Gen Z question. So you work with a lot of Gen Z talent. What are some of the generational barriers and benefits you've witnessed when it comes to opportunities in this cultural climate, and how is Rosecrans Venture filling in that gap?
You know, I'm going to start with the benefits. I like to be strengths-based. Like, Generation Z is coming into the workforce naturally entrepreneurial, naturally gravitating to technology. You give them a phone and a new app and they know how to use it within 10 seconds. And I need a whole instruction manual and a YouTube tutorial, right? You know, like, they have these sort of natural gifts. They have a swagger. They have an authenticity that I think their entire generation just comes with naturally. I do also think that because we are in the multi-generational workforce right now, you still have baby boomers that are in the workforce. You got Gen X, Gen Y, millennials, and Gen Zers. we have 5 generations in the workforce, all with different ways of entering into the workforce. And so there is a divide that exists from a generational perspective in terms of our ability to work together and understand one another and value what each generation brings. And so you hear a lot of folks that have a lot of challenges with Generation Z. And I think a lot of that comes from, well, when I had to work at the mall in the summer and I had to, wear a business suit and I had to know how to, and it's true, we did. But for them, they are operating in a generation that never had to navigate without iPhones. There's no navigation without Wi-Fi. So there's a difference in terms of sort of how they show up. And the gap that I hope to fill as a company that's hoping to power the future of work is equip managers to be strengths-based in how they engage Generation Z and equip Generation Z to manage up towards the managers and mentors that can be allies and sponsors and champions for them in their career, because both of that I think is necessary.
Beautiful. So how do you feel, or what do you think this generation is bringing to the workforce that maybe the workforce isn't realizing, right? Mm-hmm. Because there is a difference now. So what do you think this generation is bringing to the workforce that maybe the workforce isn't realizing at this, juncture of where we are, in our society of, our current workforce?
I think that Generation Z is bringing a brand new culture to the workforce where talent has the potential to be embraced across difference, where we don't all have to look the same way. Things like the Crown Act, where you could wear your hair in any way. I think that that's a product of what Generation Z is pushing organizations to do, because they are not applying for and pulling up to a job where they feel like they have to have a level of fear of not being able to be themselves. Any kind of job, and if it says in the job description that you can't have visible tattoos, you are going to lose out on a lot of talent, right? Because they're not even going to apply. My generation, it's like, wear a long jacket, always have your tattoos covered up. So what Gen Z is doing is they are gifting the workforce with an unmute button, where we don't have to silence who we are. We don't have to mute who we are. We don't have to wear a mask in the workplace. They can show up excellently and amazing and brilliant at their jobs, wearing their blue hair and with their cultural identity and with their accent and with who they are, without feeling like a part of having your dream job is muting yourself.
Wow. Now, I want to dig into that a little bit more, because that is something that the students hear a lot, right? Bring your authentic self into this space. There's a balance to that. So I'd love for you to speak a little bit to that, because if you are super loud and, you wear bright red hair and, but you're coming into a space that's a little bit more laid back, it's a little bit more conservative, how does a student, really navigate that? Because in some ways students feel like, well, am I, code switching and things, and, there's all of that going on. So talk about the balance that also has to happen, even within you still wanting to be your authentic self and bring who you are to the workforce. There's a balance in that as well. So
yes, I think that there is a balance. I also think we have to be very careful in how we define authenticity, right? Because I think authenticity and what I like to call radical professionalism, which is being able to not step into this idea of professionalism that is connected to white dominant culture, but a level of professionalism that's about authenticity and excellence, right? So, if you do have that bright red hair, and you got a big personality and you're working in a very conservative, lots of introversion on your team, that could cause a disruption, right? In terms of people's ability to be productive. So you have to manage towards environment. Doesn't mean you need to dye your hair. What it means is when you have that big, bold red hair and you are showing up and crushing it at your job, what that big, red, bold hair means is like, wow, we got to be really open to how we think about our talent profile from an aesthetic perspective. But then also, and I'll give you an example, Stacey, I am an extrovert and I am high energy. That's a good thing, right? But I had a team and I would come in the morning, good morning, everyone. Hey, happy Friday. But I had a team member who was an extreme introvert. She would be the first person in the office. And so when I come in with that energy, I was disturbing her ability to be productive. She kind of felt jolted by it. And in our one-on-one, I had to sort of shift. Instead of coming in, hey, everybody, I would stop in, and if it was just her and I would wait for her to engage me. She says, good morning. I say good morning in return because I don't want to make her uncomfortable. That does not mean that I'm not being authentic. It means that I am adjusting to ensure that I can still be excellent, I can still be who I am, and then I'm also adjusting to the team dynamics. Team dynamics are important. You cannot like it, but if I'm looking to thrive and navigate the workforce, there's still always adjustments you have to make. CEOs have to make adjustments, right? At every level, adaptability becomes important. So when we define authenticity, we have to make sure that the gumbo includes some adaptability, includes some excellence, includes understanding how you show up, includes some knowledge of the culture of your organization. All of that is connected to that.
That is so good. And I knew you would have that. Say it brilliantly, which is why I wanted it. Now, we've had the honor of partnering with you on many of our HBCU in LA summits and just in the work in general that we do, professional development workshops. So why is it important for you, and I guess, a mandate, if you would, almost, to train up the next generation?
Yeah, I love this question. And I think it's why HBCU in LA is one of my favorite clients. It's really an honor to power this work because from an industry perspective, this is a talent engine. You have radio, TV, film departments at HBCUs, you have career centers at spaces, but this is a defined engine across an entire, mass population of HBCUs, going directly into the creative economy, which really kind of inspires how people think about identity, how people consume information, what people see about Black and brown talent and about the next generation. And so it's important to me because I just believe that career readiness and how we have taught it almost reinforces messaging that it is not okay to be a Black woman in certain spaces, that your identity and who you are and what you bring to organizations is not enough, that you don't deserve to be prioritized. So much of the chatter around this recent affirmative action decision was that, why can't my population and people that look like me have equitable access? And HBCU in LA is saying you will not only have equitable access, but we are going to put you in front of the top partners in this industry, the top revenue generators in this industry. And so my role becomes ensuring that talent population is ready for that opportunity. That once they get into those doors, since equitable access is being provided, that you know how to talk to your manager, you know how to navigate difficult situations, so that if there's not a lot of people that look like you, you aren't eviscerated by that. The narratives that you tell yourself about being a minority in that space doesn't take you out of the game. My job in support of your vision and in support of HBCU in LA is the readiness part. The readiness that ensures that it's in their language, it's digestible for them, and that they are not feeling the way I often felt. This work is in service to the younger Halleemah. That was a freshman at Howard University, working a Wall Street internship, having no clue how to address a microaggression, having no clue, how to get over this fact that I'm just really unsure if this kid from Compton really belongs in this space with my thrift store suit versus, your Saks Fifth Avenue suit. What is the narrative that I tell myself about my worth and my value in that equation? And my hope is that what we are doing together and what my company can do in support of Generation Z in this work is make sure that people know and they see from a talent perspective, you are enough and you belong. And we are here to equip you with as much resources as possible so that remains a narrative that you keep with you.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. This is why that's why we do this work that we do together. So it's incredible. Anyway, I'm getting ready to go off, say something else that's not even a part of it. Stacey, stay focused. So I'm going to end it by saying, what do you want your legacy to be? I think we've heard a lot of it, but what do you want your legacy to be?
I want my legacy to be that whether it's through mentoring relationships or sponsorships or the work that I'm doing through Rosecrans Ventures, that the next generation of people can feel that their differences make them unique and beautiful and incredible and not discounted from opportunities. That's what I'd like to leave behind. Like a bunch of people that are saying, yeah, like my parents are immigrants and I never felt like I wasn't enough in my internship. I knew exactly the self-affirming narratives that I needed to tell myself when I was unsure if it was okay to be Muslim and queer in my Wall Street internship. That the differences that sometimes can make you insecure are the things that really make you equipped for a seat to lead the table. That's not a narrative that is a dominant narrative, but it's one that I like to drive home in my work.
I love it. And I love lead at the table, right? Not just have a seat. Lead. I love that. Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining me today. You're incredible. Look forward to continuing to do the work that we do. And it's just been an honor to have you as a guest today on HBCU in Entertainment.
Thank you. Keep up the powerful work, Stacey Milner.
I want to thank you for joining me today and tuning in to another episode of HBCU in Entertainment. If this episode resonates with you, please comment, rate, and review the podcast. Your feedback means the world. I appreciate you lending me your ears. Catch you on the next episode.